Have you heard about a phenomenon, an extraordinary cohort of women, or maybe less extraordinary than I think? They are women in midlife, and they are called the walkaway wives. And I'm delighted to say that Eleanor Mills, founder of Noon, which is an organisation working to improve the lives of midlife women and formerly director of the Sunday Times, joins me to tell us all about the walkaway wives who are leading the charge in midlife divorce. Hi, Eleanor. Good to have you in.
Oh, thanks very much for having me.
So tell me about this. Are we delighted that women are doing this? Are we horrified? Are we both? What are we thinking?
Well, I think we're definitely interested. I think it's a new phenomenon.
I'm interested.
Well, just to set it in context, there are more more marriages of people in their 50s and their 60s breaking up than in any other cohort. It's the only bit where divorce is actually on the rise. So I was interested in digging into that. I run this community of women in midlife, and it always used to be that it was men who instigated most of those kind of breakups at that point. But we've seen a real shift. We've just done a big report with a law firm, Mishcon de Reya, and a bank, Julius Baer, looking at midlife divorce from the kind of female point of view.
Yes.
And we found that over half of divorces now are being instigated by women. We've done a kind of, representative survey, and that 56% of women in the general population aged between 45 and 65 say that they would leave their marriage if they were unhappy. And why I think this is interesting is because I'm very interested in longevity. This is my kind of real new passion. And most of us are going to live a lot longer than we think. Probably, I'm 54. I'm quite likely to live till I'm 97, according to kind of actuaries. Exactly.
Hell of a long time.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
And, most of us are going to probably live till our late 80s, early 90s. So I think that there's something different there. If you think of the 100-year life, at 50, you're only halfway through. There's still a lot more to come. And so there's that sense of looking across the table at this person who maybe you've got nothing to say to anymore and thinking, really? Another 50 years with you? Maybe you might have done like 10 or 15 in the days where, most of it, when we had 70 years and 10.
Yes.
But if we've really got 100, that's a rather different calculation. And that's what we're seeing these women are doing. I mean, my community is all about women moving into a new chapter in their 50s. I talk about what I call queenagers. And I think that when we become queenagers, it's actually when life gets really good. And we want younger women to look forward to being in their 50s and their 60s, is when actually they have resources, they can have fun, we have agency. We're the first generation of women ever to have those kind of choices and that kind of health span at 50. And I see loads of women pivoting into, trying new things, having different careers. And so I think that in that context, there is an idea of why do you need to stay in this marriage which is no longer serving you? And a lot of our women feel like they've spent the last 25, 30 years looking after everybody else, with themselves bottom of the to-do list, always. I'm sure lots of people can relate to that. And so what I see is that at 50, it's the first time women can kind of go, well, who am I and what do I want? If I've only got, if I've got 25 years of good life left where I'm healthy and I can, what do I want to do with that? And that in a way, this is the chance.
I think it's absolutely fascinating to see your positivity. Now, people can't see you, but I can. So Eleanor is smiling with every fibre of her being. Her eyes, not joking, her eyes are sparkling, and she's got this lovely mop of curls, which is kind of bobbing in the breeze as she talks so positively about being a midlife woman. Now, look, everybody knows that that's not the usual story. People talk about menopause. I mean, when I say people, God, nobody ever shuts up about menopause.
Yes.
I remember when years ago I used to do it on the radio and I say this is the taboo, nobody ever mentions this. God, you can't say that now. People mention every 10 seconds. So you hear about, the menopausal woman who, needs to be looked after and is being sidelined and is being branded, irrelevant and is having a massive
invisible,
hot flush in the workplace and nobody cares and that. Then we also talk about how difficult it is to find new work in your 50s and how women in their 50s are likely, to want to embark on a new career or even to get a new job just to pay the bills, but they can't because everyone, writes them off as old and irrelevant. Hang on one second.
Yeah.
Now, we also hear about, women who don't want to leave a marriage because it means having to find usually somewhere else to live, and it's very difficult these days. And also the property market is stagnant. If you want to sell the family house and buy somewhere else, it's very hard. And also, you take yourself out of the kind of embrace of marriage, which is a kind of convention. You get invited united as a couple. There are 2 of you for this and 2 of you for that. It means that in the future, you know, when you have grandchildren or whatever it is, it'll be you and your divorced spouse, maybe with other partners, maybe on your own, converging as strangers in the, you know, in the hospital when the grandbaby's born, instead of just showing up with your own husband, who happens to be biologically the father of the person giving birth. You know, there are lots of reasons why people don't often do as you're doing and celebrate that period of life. And it would be remiss of me if I didn't say all those things.
I think a lot of that is very true, Vanessa. But I think that there's also another way that one can look at this. And I do think that we are a pioneering generation of women. I'm 54. I worked at the Sunday Times for 25 years. I pivoted out of that. And I feel happier and more kind of engaged and more alive now in my 50s than I ever did when I was younger. And I'm really not the only one. And I think that the rather depressing conversation about menopause...
It is depressing.
And branding women at this point as menopausal is actually not the full story. And I think it's a kind of biological lens. I don't look at my teenage daughters and call them menstrual. And I don't really want anyone to look at me and think I'm menopausal. I'm many other things. The menopausal bit is one bit of the chunk. But I think that menopausal lens is really unhelpful to women at this point. Because actually, with this point at 50, I think is when we become the women we always wanted to be. We have an opportunity to really live out our kind of best life at this point, if we choose to do that. And of course, there are demands and other things on us, and we face a huge amount of terrible ageism, gendered ageism, where ageism meets sexism. I was chair of Women in Journalism for 10 years. I've been fighting the fight against that kind of stereotype about what older women are for. And I think that we can paint a more positive picture in the same way that we have done around like homosexuality or about race. There's a different conversation about that. And I think we need a different conversation about what women are for as they age.
Talk to me, though, about the conditioning that I think many women, particularly, as you say, midlife, which you make, you know, 50, it used to be 35 and now it's 50. You know, if we live to be 100, great. Yes. But the conditioning which says that a woman without a man is de trop, you know, superfluous to requirements. You know, friends have to remember to invite you, and they don't ever invite you on a Saturday night. They might have coffee with you at 11 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday, but on a Saturday night, all the people who are there are all in part of a couple. And if you haven't got a man, you know, to hold the door open for you, you know, drive you there, pay the bill, whatever it is, whatever men do, I can't remember. You know, they probably don't. But you are, you know, you are lesser, and you have, you know, kind of little standing, and you are, you know, you're unclaimed, unwanted, undesired.
It sounds so depressing.
You know, but this is how I was brought up, and I think lots of people of a certain age, I'm trying to tell the truth, otherwise there's no point broadcasting. I don't want to do it if I can't tell the truth.
No, but,
and I was brought up, and I'm trying to overcome it.
Yes.
Because I don't believe in it. And
yes.
certainly if you're talking about my daughters and saying, you know, you need a man to complete you, I would say absolutely not. However, it's very hard to overcome that kind of conditioning. You know, that without a man, what are you? Without a husband, what are you? You know, if you let one of them slip through your fingers, what a fool. Where will you find another? That sort of thing. You can tell I'm talking from the heart. I'm not making this up for the radio. I really feel this. I don't mean I feel it's right, but I mean the feeling that you should feel that way, or you've been brought up to feel that way, is very, very hard to triumph over. It really is, to kind of repress that voice. Like, who are you on your own? You're going to walk into a wedding by yourself. Everyone's going to stand up and dance. You're going to sit there on your own. No one will dance with you, unless they have some single uncle from Australia that nobody likes, you know, who'll do you the favour of, you know, maybe asking you to do one dance to bloody own Una Paloma Blanca. You know, what a nightmare. So how do you get over that feeling?
Well, I think that there's a generational thing on this, because certainly, and you and I were kind of a little bit apart. So I think there's a slightly different lens. Certainly, what I'm doing with my Noon community is I'm creating an alternative way to have fun in your 50s and 60s. I run loads of events, retreats. We run circles all over the UK where women kind of come together. And what my whole thing is about is say yes to joy. You know, what makes you happy? Yeah. What makes you feel really fully alive? I'm a nutter. I like getting in the cold water every morning. I swam in the ladies' pond this morning on Hampstead Heath.
How ghastly.
Exactly, which is not everyone's cup of tea. But everyone has something that they really love. And what I see with the women is that when they really kind of tap into a passion, or if they come along and they really start talking to the other women in the group, they realise they can have a great time without a man being part of the picture. future. And so I think that there is a bit of a shift that we don't have to see ourselves through the male gaze. You know, our daughters have all these kind of books like, Women Don't Owe You Pretty. And they're trying, I think there is a different shifting sense across the generations of not needing a man to kind of to complete us, and realising that we can have agency and do the things that we want in our life, which is not about having a man there to do that for us. And we can have fantastic networks of female friends and do other things, and we can see ourselves not in the black and white of the patriarchy of valuing ourselves for being kind of young or sexy or fecund or kind of, beautiful, or the things that men want us to be, but we can see ourselves in full technicolor rather than just that black and white for all the things that women are: creative, fun, full of joy, kind of full of passion.
You're certainly exuding all of the above. So if anybody listening, I mean, women, I suppose midlife women are listening and they fancy joining in or doing whatever you're doing, or at least checking out what you're doing, what do they have to do to find you?
Well, come along and find us at noon.org.uk. And I also wrote a book. I wrote a best-selling book last year called Much More to Come. Lessons on the mayhem and magnificence of midlife. And that has the stories of about me, but about 20 other women who have really reinvented at this time, and really digs into how we can begin to change the conditioning that makes us feel like we're only...
Final question. This doesn't come from me. This comes from my producer, Emily, who is a stripling, a young spring chicken. But she wants me to ask you this, and actually it's a good question. Well done. She says, what does Eleanor think about the Vogue piece that says it's embarrassing to have a boyfriend these days?
Well, I think that's probably going in the right direction. I mean, that's certainly the other end of the spectrum of what you've been expressing. And I think that women will feel better about themselves and less kind of, grim and alone if they stop valuing themselves for being on the arm of a man who may or may not be nice to them. What the divorce research is showing is that a lot of women are getting to a point in a marriage where there was this one quote that one woman said to me. She said, every day in my marriage, I felt like I'd had a paper cut. It was being ignored or not seen, or something that I'd done not being appreciated. And after 25 years, I realised that both my hands were bleeding.
Oh, wow.
And so it's that kind of sense of just having felt undermined for so long. And then they get to a point where they're just like, I am so done. And then they are off. And of course, that's sad. But what we found when we interviewed people was that the top word about their divorce was sad, but then the next four were happiness, liberation, joy, escape. And so I do think that there's a possibility for us to move into a new phase, a queenager phase at 50 plus, and really become the women that we want to be, and to shed some of those.
It's been an absolute riot having you in the studio, I must say. I wish you could see her. I don't say that with everybody. It's not that all my guests aren't beautiful. They're all gorgeous. But there's something about Emily. There's the Eleanor. There's just something about the I don't know, what would you say? What is it, Emily? What can you see? What's going on? What can you see? It's joie de vivre.
Yeah,
There's joie de vivre. There's a joy about her. There is. There really is.
And there can be for more women.
And there can be for more women. That is the moral of that story. Thank you very much indeed. Lovely to have you here.
Thanks so much.
And really cheered me up no end. All right, lovely listener. This is LBC. The time 5:47. Vanessa Feltz here.